I'm Emily Dawson, 34 years old, active duty colonel in the United States Army. But in my family, I'm the one who ran away and never settled down. I was sitting in my apartment at Fort Linwood when the invitation arrived. Cream envelope, gold lettering, all very Morgan. Inside, it said, Morgan Chambers and Evan Drummond request the honor of your presence at their engagement celebration. No personal note, just my name typed in a generic font. The return address label said Crescent Hill, our hometown. I hadn't been there in years. Morgan's handwriting was everywhere in my life, scrawled on my notebooks and fake apology cards when we fought. Now it was gone like we were strangers, or worse, public relations contacts. I stared at the RSVP card. It said, dress code, formal, no uniforms. Cute. A passive-aggressive way of reminding me who the show's real star was. Morgan always made sure I knew. When we were kids, she was the gifted one, the one with piano recitals, debate trophies, and a smile that made grown men forget what they were saying. I was the kid who asked for Hot Wheels instead of Barbies, who learned how to throw a punch before she learned how to apply mascara. My parents, Robert and Sydney Dawson, tried. They did. But they were suburban, church on Sundays, potluck people. Morgan made sense to them. I didn't. By 16, I was helping neighbors with yard work for cash, maxing out the pull-up bar at school, and making a list of colleges with ROTC programs. Morgan was already looking at Vanderbilt. She got in. Full ride. My parents cried at the acceptance letter. When I enlisted instead of going to college, my mom called it a phase. My dad looked embarrassed. Morgan smirked like she knew I'd be home in 6 months, begging for help writing a resume. I didn't come home, not for years. Comment if you've ever had a sibling like that. The kind who shines so bright, your whole existence feels like a shadow. And hit subscribe. You'll want to hear how this turns out. I didn't go to Morgan's college graduation, or her 27th birthday cruise, or the Christmas after she accidentally posted that Facebook status, calling me her veteran sister who probably works in supply. I was too busy leading combat engineers through flood zones and coordinating disaster relief in countries Morgan couldn't find on a map. But this invitation, this was different. It hit me in a place I didn't know was still sore. Maybe it was how clinical it felt, like I was a box to check, a body to fill a seat. Or maybe I'd spent 15 years earning every stripe, every star on my uniform, only to come home and still be treated like someone who didn't figure things out. So yeah, I RSP'd. I packed a bag, booked a ticket to Crescent Hill, not because I cared about the champagne or the couple's slideshow. I went home because I was done being the background character in Morgan's story. And if she still thought I was just her weird army sister who could have done better with her life, she was in for a surprise. Because the thing about shadows, they always move when the light changes. The second I stepped off the plane, I regretted not renting a car. Crescent Hill's regional airport was barely more than a glorified shack with vending machines. The only taxi in sight had a cracked windshield and a bumper sticker that said, "Retired, not expired." The driver looked retired and expired. He dropped me off at my parents' house around 8 p.m. The porch light was on. Same peeling paint on the steps. Same dying azaleas my mom refused to replace. I stood there with my duffel bag over my shoulder, debating whether to knock or just walk in like I used to. I knocked. Habit from years of not being welcomed. My mom opened the door like she'd been expecting a UPS package. She blinked, then smiled too wide. "Emily, you made it. No dress code violation, I hope," I said, stepping inside. She didn't laugh. The house smelled like lemon polish and forced civility. Framed photos of Morgan were everywhere. College graduation, marketing award. Glamour shots in black and white. One of me in uniform was cropped so tight that you couldn't see the rank or ribbons. That always felt intentional. Dad was in the den watching golf. He waved when I walked in and didn't mute the TV. "Look who's here," he said to no one. "How's the army?" Still standing, I replied. We made it through dinner like three people acting in a play none of us auditioned for. My mom asked if I wanted wine, then poured me a Diet Coke before I answered. She asked if I was still stationed somewhere warm, and if I ever thought about getting out. I said I hadn't decided. That was easier than reminding her I re-upped 2 years ago and was eligible for promotion again in 6 months. When Morgan's name came up, it came up like scripture. The wedding, the dress, the catering, the custom invitations from a boutique called Pressed and Blessed. I listened and nodded as I used to in school when teachers talked about things I already knew. Then Mom asked if I'd mind sleeping in the den, because the guest room was full of centerpieces. Sure, I said. Wouldn't want to disturb the hydrangeas. After dinner, I sat on the back porch while they cleaned up. Same plastic lawn furniture, same rusted wind chimes that made me insane as a teenager. I lit a cigarette, not because I smoke, but because I needed something in my hand that wasn't a clenched fist. That's when Dad came out. You okay? He asked, easing into the chair beside me. Peachy. He nodded like that was good enough. Then he said, You know, your sisters worked really hard for this moment. It'd mean a lot if you didn't make things complicated. I didn't answer, just stared into the backyard, where weeds had conquered whatever was left of Mom's garden. A plastic flamingo lay sideways in the dirt like it gave up trying. He patted my shoulder once and went back inside. A few minutes later, I heard my mom through the kitchen window saying, She looks tired. I hope she doesn't do anything dramatic. And Morgan, on speakerphone. Don't worry, Emily thrives on disappearing. That's what she's good at. I put out the cigarette. No, I wasn't surprised I wasn't in Morgan's engagement post. I wasn't surprised I'd been downgraded to sleeping next to a boxed chocolate fountain and a tablecloth steamer. But somewhere in me, some part I didn't like admitting still existed, was hoping someone, anyone, would be glad I came. That part of me shrank a little more that night, and whatever was left of it, it was getting ready to burn. I woke up to my mother yelling at a box of floral foam. She was in the kitchen, flustered, surrounded by centerpiece kits and unopened crates of glass vases. She muttered something about Morgan's aesthetic and vendors who don't understand luxury. I stayed on the den couch, blanket twisted around me, watching her juggle 3 phone calls and a hot glue gun before coffee. By 9 a.m., Morgan burst through the front door like a one-woman PR campaign. Her hair was blown out, and she wore a taupe cashmere wrap and oversized sunglasses. Even though it was cloudy, she didn't knock. She never did. Emily, she said, giving me a once-over like a stain on her rug. Wow, you look present. Nice to see you too, I said, standing up. She dropped her leather tote on the dining table, on top of a box labeled Fragile, and kissed Mom's cheek like a politician. I've got a full day. The tent company double-booked. The makeup trial ran late. Evan's parents are flying in, and I haven't eaten anything but almonds since Tuesday. So if we could keep the vibes light, that'd be amazing. I'll do my best to control my military-grade emotions, I said. She ignored that. Or didn't get it. Hard to tell. Mom shot me a look that said, Please, not today. Morgan gave me a rapid-fire list of rules. Where to stand, what not to wear, which table was for press photos only. She said all this while texting, then she looked up and added, Oh, and no uniforms. It's a civilian event. We don't want things to feel aggressive. I raised an eyebrow. Sure, wouldn't want anyone mistaking structure for a threat. She fake laughed. Still got that dark humor, so you. She was already halfway through another message when Evan walked in. Tall, polished, clean-cut. Brooks Brothers catalog model. He seemed genuinely surprised to see me. Extended a hand. You must be Emily. I've heard a lot about you. I shook his hand. Firm measured. His eyes hesitated on mine. All good things, I hope, I said. Without missing a beat, Morgan said, Don't worry, I kept it PG. Everyone laughed like we were all in on some private joke I didn't want to understand. They left for a food tasting at a vineyard called Ridgepoint Terrace. Before heading out, Morgan reminded Mom to text the florist. No baby's breath, no hydrangeas, and no last-minute substitutions. Tell her this is not a Hobby Lobby wedding." Once the door closed behind them, my mom turned to me and said, "She's under a lot of pressure. This is a huge moment." "Yeah," I said, flat. I remember coordinating civilian evacuations in Central America after the landslide. Stressful times. She frowned. "Why do you always have to be like this?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That question had been asked since I was 15, and no one ever stuck around long enough to wait for the answer. Dad asked me to help string lights across the backyard in the afternoon. We didn't talk much. He told me about the neighbors, who divorced, got a boat, and bought a generator. He asked once if I still worked with maps and radios. I said, something like that. He nodded as he understood. He didn't. Later that night, I passed the dining room and saw the seating chart on the table. Fancy calligraphy for Morgan and Evan. Neatly printed cards for everyone else. Then I saw mine, scrawled in pencil, half erased, next to the bar. Like an afterthought. Or a spare part. That tracks. I stood there staring at the little name card with smudged graphite and curled corners. My sister had custom menus, curated lighting, and a social media team. I got the bar, and honestly, it said more about my place in this family than any speech ever could. I moved my name card 3 inches to the left, just enough to make someone notice, but not enough to start a war. The next morning started with fake smiles and coffee that tasted like regret. Morgan was already dressed as if she were about to be interviewed by a bridal blogger. Flowy silk pants, dewy makeup, gold necklace with the letter M. She called it effortless. It screamed curated. Evan showed up 20 minutes late. His hair wasn't combed right, his shirt buttoned wrong, and it was like he had a late night or an identity crisis in the parking lot. Still, he looked like money. That's Morgan's type. Clean, quiet, unshakable. "Sorry I'm late," he muttered, setting his phone screen down like it held secrets. Traffic from Lakehurst was a nightmare. I looked up. Lakehurst. 3 years ago, I'd run a joint logistics drill there. 120 personnel. Helicopters, medical tents, satellite uplinks. I'd signed off on his unit's debrief myself. He said it like it was a beach resort. Morgan looped her arm through his. "Babe, we've got 12 hours to finalize the playlist. I don't want ironic dancing. No Macarena. No TikTok garbage. If someone starts line dancing, I'll light the tent on fire." He gave her a weak smile, then looked over her head. At me. "Colonel Dawson," he said softly. "Not for everyone. Just enough for the hair on the back of my neck to stand up." My spine straightened on instinct. "Excuse me?" he blinked. "Nothing. Sorry, you just look familiar." Morgan jumped in with perfect timing. "She does have that boot camp vibe, right? All shoulders and no eyeliner. But don't worry, she files court records now." My mouth went dry. She didn't even know how wrong she was. Evan glanced down, cleared his throat, and looked away. I watched him. The shift had started. That quiet flicker when someone begins to remember a face they were trained to obey. We broke for lunch. I stepped onto the porch and called Taylor, my cousin, the only person in this bloodline who didn't look at me like a pothole in the family driveway. "Tell me I'm not losing it," I said. "You're not. You're just temporarily stuck in a wedding-themed twilight zone," she replied. "How many centerpiece meltdowns so far?" I told her about Evan's words, about the flicker in his eyes. She went silent. "Hold up," she said. "Is he one of yours? From Fort Linwood?" He might have been in my joint training group. He wouldn't recognize me out of uniform, but his instincts did. "Emily," she said, suddenly serious, "if this guy stands up at the altar and salutes you, I'm bringing popcorn." I laughed harder than I had in days. Back inside, Morgan was directing vendors like she owned the company. Someone bumped a lantern, and she hissed, "You had one job." Evan was nowhere to be seen. The backyard looked like Pinterest vomited all over Martha Stewart. String lights, white chairs, fresh eucalyptus garlands. My name card had been moved, again, back to the bar. That told me Morgan noticed the shift too. She couldn't risk having me close to the spotlight. especially not if Evan's memory has finished loading. By late afternoon, the photographer showed up. Morgan posed as if her jawline depended on it. Our mother hovered behind a tray of crudités, worrying whether the prosciutto roses looked too greasy. And Evan? He kept sneaking glances, like a man trying to place a voice in a dream. He was close. One more nudge, and everything she'd built, her narrative, curated image, and perfect fiancé, would tremble. I didn't need to say a word. Evan was already doing the math. And when the answer came, it wouldn't add up to Morgan. I didn't look away when he stared. If he were trying to place me, I'd let him feel the pressure. By the time the rehearsal dinner started, Evan had stopped pretending not to look. I caught him watching me from across the patio more times than I could count. Not in a flirty way. It's not even suspicious. He was cataloging, indexing, running every second of memory through a mental database. And Morgan was busy holding court in the backyard, as if being whelmed for a Netflix special called Bridal Narcissism. She wore an ivory dress that wasn't technically a wedding gown, but may as well have been. Our mother fussed over the lighting like it was opening night on Broadway. I found my place card again, a different table, further from the center. Morgan must have had the caterer move it, again. I almost laughed. Evan's sat was 2 spots down. Morgan was in the middle, splitting us like a human firewall. I sat quietly, answered polite questions from cousins I barely remembered, and smiled when the photographer snapped candids. But I kept Evan in my periphery. He was fidgeting, tapping his fingers against his wine glass. Looking between Morgan and me, I see that the math still didn't check out. And then during dessert, he leaned over Morgan's shoulder and said too casually, "What did you say your sister does again?" Morgan laughed. "She answers phones at the county building, babe. Filing or something." My jaw clenched. The strawberry tart on my plate might as well have been drywall. "That's not what I heard," Evan said, almost under his breath. Morgan blinked. "Excuse me?" He smiled. "Just saying. Someone at work said they'd seen a Dawson in uniform. A female officer. Said she ran the flood logistics unit at Linwood a few years ago. Small world." Morgan looked like someone had dumped ice down her dress. "Emily doesn't, she's not in uniform. I mean, she was in ROTC in college, I think." I sipped my water and watched them. Evan turned to me. "You were at Linwood, right?" I met his eyes without blinking. "I was." Morgan laughed too loudly. "She visited once, took a tour or something." I didn't respond. Silence settled in like a fog. That was the moment. The second I felt the shift in Evan's expression. He wasn't guessing anymore. "Did we meet before?" he asked. I tilted my head. "You tell me." Morgan cut in again, voice tighter now. "Babe, she's messing with you. Emily doesn't do anything like that anymore. Trust me." His eyes didn't leave mine. "What rank are you?" "Morgan says I answer phones," I said calmly. "You sure you want my version?" A long pause. Someone clinked a fork against a plate and tried to change the subject. But Evan was locked in. He wasn't smiling anymore. "I served under a Colonel Dawson, briefly, flood response unit. She shut down an entire supply chain op in under 6 hours when FEMA failed to coordinate. Saved 3 towns. Morgan shifted in her seat. "You're thinking of someone else." "No," he said. "I'm not." I stood, smoothly. No drama. "Excuse me, I need to call in a situation report." That wasn't true, but I wanted him to sit with it. To watch the space I left behind and realize what he'd just said out loud. I paced next to a hedge that cost more than a month of hazard pay. My phone buzzed. Taylor, texting a gif of a bomb going off. I didn't reply, just stared up at the darkening sky, listening to the distant hum of string lights and soft jazz, and one man in the middle of a realization that was about to blow up everything he thought he knew about his perfect future. Inside, Morgan kept smiling, but her grip on his arm was tighter now. I walked back in just as the toast started, and Evan still hadn't sat down. He stood beside his chair, one hand in his pocket, the other running over his jaw. He looked like someone trying to solve a puzzle with a piece he suddenly realized he'd been holding upside down. Morgan was already mid-speech. Her voice had that glossy, performative warmth she used whenever she had an audience. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Evan and I are so thrilled to start this new chapter together, and your love means the world. She reached for Evan's hand. He hesitated just half a second, enough for anyone paying attention to notice, before stepping in. We've both worked hard to get where we are, Morgan continued, and we've supported each other through so much. Evan's career is, well, let's just say I always knew I'd marry someone exceptional. Polite laughter rolled through the tent. I stood near a bucket of melted ice and flat lemonade, unseen. And I know what some of you might be wondering, she said. How can I possibly compete with this man? She squeezed his arm. But the truth is, I bring something irreplaceable to the table. Morgan paused, milking the moment like a seasoned actress. I bring heart, loyalty, family. I show up. I don't chase medals. I don't need to outshine the people who raised me. Evan glanced back, directly at me. And some of us, Morgan added with a syrupy smile, should remember that real strength is being present, not disappearing behind a title. The line hung in the air like a trap. Someone from our side of the family, Aunt Pam maybe, raised her glass too early, and Morgan chuckled like a talk show guest. Not yet, Auntie. Let Evan say a few words. He didn't move at first, just looked down at the table. Then he exhaled slowly, picked up his champagne, and turned toward the group. Thank you all for being here, he said. I've been lucky in life, no question. Good schools, great mentors, and now this beautiful woman beside me. I'm proud of what I've accomplished. Morgan beamed, already expecting the follow-up compliment. But tonight, he continued, I was reminded there's more than one kind of success. She blinked. He didn't look at her. There's the kind that fits on a business card, he said. And then there's the kind earned quietly, without an audience, through decisions no one else could make. He raised his glass and looked directly at me. To Colonel Emily Dawson, he said clearly. Dead silence. Someone dropped a fork. A child coughed. Morgan's smile cracked like old plaster. What are you talking about? Evan didn't look away. You didn't tell them? I said nothing. Morgan laughed, sharp and shrill. You can't be serious. I served under her, Evan said. Flood Response Unit, Linwood. She led the whole op. Saved 3 towns in 72 hours. I didn't recognize her out of uniform. She's not, Morgan sputtered. She's not a colonel. I looked at her. You never asked. Our father's voice sliced through the hush. Emily, I turned slightly. Yes, Dad. I've been active duty for 12 years. Promoted last spring. I didn't think it mattered here. Whispers buzzed like insects. Morgan's eyes were wide, blinking too fast. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. And then Evan, hands still raised, turned back to the room and said it. Salute, Colonel. No sarcasm. No drama. Just quiet. Earned respect. It landed like a shot across the bow. For the first time in her life, Morgan had nothing to say. I didn't flinch when Morgan turned to me like she was ready to lunge across the cake table. Her eyes were wild, not just shocked, furious. Her voice cracked as she barked, What is this? Some kind of stunt? I stood my ground. It's the truth. You said I've been hiding in the background? Maybe you just never looked. Don't do this here, she hissed. Not tonight. You did this, Evan cut in, his voice tight. You stood up and tore her down in front of everyone. I just said her title. I didn't ask for this, I added, steady. I didn't even want to come tonight. I knew how this would go. Then why are you here? She snapped. I met her eyes. Because Mom asked. Because Dad texted 3 times. Because no matter how many times you cut me down, part of me still thinks this family might see me for who I am. Our mother stood now, pale and trembling. Emily, we didn't know. Exactly, I said. You never asked. You never even wondered why I was never free on federal holidays. Why I moved so often. Why I had a lockbox instead of a closet. My father looked like he'd been gut-punched. Colonel, I gave a slight nod. Active duty, infantry, logistics, and now JAG. I command personnel, coordinate crisis response, and fun fact, I've been to more war zones than wedding receptions. Laughter, short and bitter, escaped from Morgan. Well, congratulations. You got your standing ovation. Must feel great. I felt every eye on me, but I answered her anyway. Actually, it feels exhausting. Morgan turned on Evan. You knew this? Not until tonight, he said flatly. But now a lot makes sense. She played you, she snapped. She used this to humiliate me. You're letting her win. No one's winning here, Evan said, but only one person's been competing. That made her blink. She reeled back half a step like she hadn't expected anyone, especially not him, to say it out loud. Uncle Brad coughed awkwardly. Well, Emily, that's impressive. Really, I didn't realize. You weren't supposed to, I said. I made sure of that. Every holiday I dressed down. Every question I dodged. Because I knew this family only had room for one star. Morgan crossed her arms. Oh, please. Like I've never had to work for anything. You haven't, I said. You've had to perform, but not work, not carry bodies out of flood zones, not stand between soldiers and suicide. Gasps. Grandma dropped her napkin. That's not fair, Morgan muttered. Neither is war, I said. But I showed up. She looked like she might scream, but Evan gently took her elbow. Morgan, maybe we need a minute. She shook him off. You're taking her side? I'm not taking sides, he said. I'm seeing clearly for the first time. Around us, the party atmosphere had imploded. Guests were either sneaking out or standing frozen with their drinks, caught between fascination and horror. I could hear someone whispering by the bar, probably relaying the story already. Our mother stepped closer. Emily, I wish you'd told us. I looked at her. I wish you'd asked. My father cleared his throat. You're a judge too. No, I said. That's another Emily. I'm just a colonel. And I've got a flight to DC in the morning, so I'd appreciate it if we could wrap this circus up. Morgan threw her champagne down. The glass didn't shatter. It bounced off the turf. Anticlimactic and ridiculous. Classic, I said under my breath. She spun toward me. You think you're better than us now? I think I survived things you don't even believe in, I said. And that has nothing to do with being better. Just different. Different, she scoffed. Right. Evan gave her a long, unreadable look. Maybe it's time we all accept that. And Morgan, for once, didn't have a snappy comeback. I turned away from Morgan and walked straight to the patio's edge, needing air more than victory. My hands were steady, but my chest was tight. The crowd behind me had thinned. The conversation now reduced to scattered murmurs and clinking glasses. Nobody was toasting anymore. Good. It didn't feel like anything worth celebrating. I stood near the hedges, staring at the dark lawn. The air smelled like roses and overcooked shrimp. Someone's kid was crying inside the house. Probably wanted cake. That made two of us. A shuffle behind me broke the quiet. I didn't turn. Emily, Evan's voice, lower, calmer, still, shaken. I sighed. You don't have to say anything. This isn't your problem. Well, he said, it's a little late for that. I finally looked at him. His tie was crooked now. He'd loosened it since the explosion. Smart move. She's spiraling, he added. You probably guessed. I've seen actual spirals, I said. This is just tantrum energy. He cracked a small smile. Doesn't make it easier to stand in the blast radius. I glanced over his shoulder. Through the glass door, Morgan was pacing with a drink in one hand and her phone in the other. She is probably texting her therapist. Or her PR guy. She always preferred optics to truth. Are you okay? He asked. His voice a little more personal now. I shrugged. Define okay. You looked surgical in there. Cold. That wasn't cold, I said. That was years of bite-my-tongue discipline snapping in half. He nodded slowly. I don't blame you. A moment passed before I said, But you still want to marry her? He didn't answer right away. I don't know, he said honestly. That version of her? Number the one who laughs at brunch and cries over dog commercials? Maybe. Depends which one comes back. You sure one ever left? I asked, genuinely curious. He ran a hand over his jaw. You've had a long time to build a case against her. I didn't deny it. I kept my mouth shut for years, but don't mistake that for forgiveness. It was silence, not peace. Evan nodded again. I didn't know she had a sister until 6 months into dating her. Sounds about right. She called you military admin the first time she mentioned you. Said you moved around too much to hold a real job. That stung, even though it shouldn't have. I took a breath. You know how many combat deployments I've been on? No. 3. Iraq, Syria, then Ukraine with NATO logistics. That job she thought was mail clerk stuff? That was medevac operations. He let out a low whistle. Yeah, I said. But sure, I was the one with no ambition. He leaned on the stone wall beside me, silent for a while. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I knew exactly how she'd react, I said. And part of me hoped if I just stayed quiet, maybe one day she'd ask. Actually ask. And she never did. She never saw past the story she made up. Just then, the door opened. Our dad stepped out, tie loosened, face like he'd aged 10 years since dessert. Hey, Em, I turned halfway. Hey. He walked toward us slowly. You heading out? Thinking about it, he nodded, looking at his shoes. I owe you an apology. I waited. We failed you, not because we meant to, but because we didn't pay attention. That landed harder than I expected. He wasn't the emotional type. I used to joke about how easy you were, low maintenance, didn't cause trouble. You also called me the quiet one, I reminded him. Yeah, he said. Turns out quiet doesn't mean content. I didn't respond. Your mother's inside crying, he added. She tends to cry when the spotlight shifts. No, he said. She's crying because she's embarrassed. She thought she knew her daughter. She never asked to, I said. Evan excused himself politely and stepped away, letting us talk. I appreciated that. Dad rubbed the back of his neck. Is it too late to fix this? I don't know, I said, but it's not about fixing me. I'm not broken. I'm just done shrinking. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. We'll adjust. Good, I said, because I'm not dialing it back. A silence passed. I'm proud of you, Em. The words were rough as if they tasted foreign in his mouth. I know, I said, even if you never said it. He reached out like he might hug me, then thought better of it and patted my shoulder. Be safe flying out, he mumbled. I always am. I turned, walked down the steps, and crossed the yard toward the sidewalk. I didn't look back. Not because I was angry, but because, for once, I didn't need a second opinion. I pulled into the base parking lot just past midnight, headlights cutting through the fog like I was chasing ghosts. The gates at Fort Linwood never really slept, but even the MPs were sluggish this late. I showed my ID, got the wave through, and parked near my quarters. The moment I killed the engine, silence crashed in like a wave. I sat there for a minute, both hands on the wheel, before finally letting my head fall back against the seat. My chest hurt, not in a medical way, just in that deep bone, long exhaustion way. No adrenaline left, just aftermath. I didn't go inside right away. Instead, I walked toward the operations building. It was technically closed, but I had access, and I needed the familiar hum of fluorescent lights more than I needed sleep. Inside, the place was dead quiet. The tactical boards were dark, and the coffee maker was still half full from yesterday's shift. I slid my keycard through the secure door to my office, pushed the door open, and dropped into the stiff leather chair like gravity had a grudge. I turned on my monitor and just stared at it. Case files, logistics memos, readiness drills. It all felt distant, not irrelevant, just small. After the chaos at Morgan's party, even military bureaucracy felt like a kind of mercy. I rubbed my eyes. I hadn't planned to stay in uniform this long, but part of me didn't want to change out. The patches, the stripes, the name tag, they were anchors, proof that who I was in that room earlier wasn't a fantasy. Everything Morgan said about me had never once touched who I was. A knock on the open door made me look up. Captain Mendez stood there, holding 2 coffees from the vending cups, Necofe like a peace offering. "You look like you might still be awake," he said. I gestured to the chair across from me. "You're psychic." He handed me the cup and then sat down without asking. Mendez wasn't one for small talk, which I appreciated. He sipped his coffee and finally asked, "Everything good, Colonel?" I gave a short laugh. "Define good." "You look like someone who survived something." I raised my cup. "Civilian combat, high casualties, mostly egos." He didn't push. He never did, but he watched me, waiting. "Family," I said eventually. "Turns out mine didn't know who I was." His eyebrows ticked up slightly. "How the hell does that happen?" "Years of strategic silence and tactical avoidance." He gave a low whistle. "You want me to call in a drone strike?" That made me smile for the first time all night. Tempting. He leaned back in his chair. "My mom still thinks I just fix computers for the army. Some people don't want the truth. They want comfort. My sister's version of comfort was me staying small so she could stay big. And now?" I sipped my coffee, bitter and perfect. "Now she knows. So does everyone else." Mendez nodded, pulled something from his inside pocket, and slid it across the desk. A folded-up flyer for the base mentoring program. He tapped it once. "We got a bunch of new female recruits coming in from Fort Meade. Logistics, intel, and some medevac support. Young, sharp, overwhelmed. They could use a colonel who doesn't talk like a PowerPoint." I looked at the flyer, then at him. "You think I'm good at pep talks?" I asked. "No," he said without hesitation. "But you've lived what they're walking into. That matters more." I pocketed the paper. "I'll think about it." Mendez stood. "You don't have to fix everything overnight, Colonel. Just show up. That's usually enough." The silence settled again as he left, but it felt less heavy. I turned back to my monitor and pulled up the Westlake case. Civilian contractor theft and international logistics violations were nothing I couldn't handle. I scanned the docket and noticed the defense attorney assigned. Evan had filed a motion to dismiss last week. Of course he did. I highlighted the note and set it for Monday's review. No special treatment, no recusal. I could separate personal from professional. That's why they trusted me with a gavel in the first place. By the time I got home, it was almost 3 a.m. I stripped off the uniform like it was a second skin I'd outgrown and climbed into the shower. The water was too hot. I didn't care. I needed the heat to burn away everything sticky and lingering. When I got out, the mirror was fogged over. I wiped it with my hand and stared at my reflection. Bare-faced, hair wet, eyes tired but clear. Not a judge, not a sister, just me. My phone buzzed. A text from Morgan. "Can we talk soon?" Just us. No emojis, no punctuation fluff. Just human. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at it, letting the water drip from my hair, the tile cold under my feet, wondering if maybe, just maybe, that text wasn't the start of another battle. Maybe it was the white flag, and maybe, for once, I was ready to meet her without armor. I set my phone down on the counter, grabbed a towel, and decided I wouldn't answer her until I knew what I wanted to say, if anything at all. By morning, the message still sat unread. I made coffee, stared out the window, and let the silence do its job. It was Saturday, which meant no hearings, no staff briefings, and no one expecting me to be anything but alone. I sat cross-legged on my couch, flipping through an old Army journal I used to scribble in during deployment, back when the world felt louder and simpler at the same time. A knock at the door made me flinch. 3 short taps, like someone hesitant but impatient. When I opened it, I didn't expect to see Morgan. She wasn't dressed for confrontation. No makeup, just a hoodie and jeans, their hair twisted up like she barely looked in the mirror before leaving the house. She had a paper coffee cup in one hand and a small box in the other. Her eyes looked like she hadn't slept. "I wasn't sure you'd answer," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure I would either." She handed me the coffee. "Still take it black." I nodded and stepped aside to let her in. She paused before entering like the space might bite her. Then she crossed the threshold like she was walking into court without counsel. I shut the door behind her. She set the box down on my counter. "I brought you something from Mom's attic." I opened it and saw a stack of old photo albums, dust-smudged and crooked. Baby pictures, birthday parties, graduation cards. One from my commissioning ceremony I hadn't even remembered existed. "I didn't know she kept all this," I murmured. "Neither did I. I was looking for something to distract myself from, well, everything." I ran a hand over the top album. "So what's this? An olive branch?" "No," she said, honest. "It's proof I remember, too." I didn't reply. I just walked back to the couch, coffee in hand. She followed but didn't sit until I gave her a nod. For a moment, we were just two women in a quiet room with no rank or spotlight. Just blood and history. Morgan stared at her knees. "I've been replaying everything I said at the party. It's not flattering." "It wasn't." I sounded like an insecure brat. I raised an eyebrow. "You were." She exhaled. "Fair." I leaned back, sipping the coffee she brought. It was lukewarm, still better than most apologies I'd ever been given. "Why now?" I asked. She looked at me, eyes steady. "Because I don't want to lose my sister." My throat tightened. I wasn't prepared for that level of sincerity. "And Nathan?" I asked. She hesitated. "He's staying with his brother for a while. Says he needs space." "Do you love him?" "Yes, but maybe not the way I thought I did. I think I loved what he represented more than who he really is." I nodded. "That's honest." "I'm trying." I turned toward her. "So what do you want from me, Morgan?" Really, she didn't blink. "A chance to earn back your respect. You're not entitled to it just because we share DNA." "I know." She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "Dad wrote this after the party. He didn't know how to give it to you. I offered to be the mule." I opened it slowly. His handwriting was rough as if he hadn't picked up a pen in years. The letter was short. "Abby, I'm sorry for not seeing you, for letting the noise drown out your voice. You didn't deserve that. Dad." It wasn't much, but it was something. I folded the letter and tucked it inside the photo album. "He mean it?" "I think so." Morgan's voice dropped. "He hasn't stopped talking about you since that night. It's half pride, half guilt." I shook my head, not out of disbelief, just weariness. "It's going to take more than words, Morgan. From all of you." "I know." We sat silently, like soldiers who'd just returned from the same war, but were too bruised to compare wounds. "I told my boss the truth," she said after a while. "About the promotion, about the lies. He wasn't thrilled, but he didn't fire me." "Good." "He offered to help me build a real track, earn it for real this time." "That's something." She smiled faintly. "It's a start." Another silence fell between us. This one felt less awkward, more like something settling into place. "I'm not going to pretend this fixes everything," she said, rising. "But I want to do better. I want us to do better." I stood too. Doing better means showing up, consistently. I can do that. She moved toward the door, then paused. "You look terrifying in uniform, by the way. Evan still can't get over it. Keeps calling you ma'am even in his sleep." I laughed finally. "Tell him I accept his surrender." Morgan gave me one last look, half hope, half shame, and walked out. I didn't watch her go. I just stood there, coffee in hand, heart a little lighter than the day before. I grabbed the envelope again that night, reread Dad's handwriting in the glow of the kitchen light, and felt something shift in my chest. Something I hadn't let myself feel since basic training. It was Sunday when I finally agreed to dinner. Not a birthday, not a holiday, just dinner, like normal families did. Though we weren't exactly that. The last time I'd sat at my parents' table, someone was comparing me to a damn office assistant, and raising a toast to knowing your place. So yeah, my expectations were in the basement. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if the apology had shrunk her bones. Her smile was tentative, the kind of smile someone wears when rehearsing it all day. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "Still military enough to make a grown man sit up straight," I said, stepping inside. Dad was already at the table, fidgeting with silverware, like it might rearrange the tension in the air. He stood when he saw me but didn't come in for a hug. That weirdly felt like progress. "I made roast chicken," Mom said. "And your favorite salad. No olives." I nodded. "Thanks." We mainly ate in silence at first. The clink of forks and the fridge's hum were louder than anyone's voice. It felt like a courtroom where no one wanted to be the first to speak. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother and we've been talking." That much was obvious. They looked like two kids caught sneaking out after curfew. "We know we screwed up," he said. "We didn't see what you were becoming. And that's on us." I didn't say anything. Let them sweat a little longer. Mom jumped in. "We always thought you didn't need the praise. That you were so self-sufficient. You didn't need what Morgan did." "That's how you justified ignoring it," I said flatly. Her lips tightened. "Yes." Dad set his fork down. "I'm sorry, Abigail. Truly. I didn't know you were carrying all that weight by yourself." "I was in Kandahar when Morgan got promoted to assistant marketing manager," I said. "You threw her a barbecue. I got dust storms and sporadic Wi-Fi." They winced. "I'm not mad about the celebration," I continued. "I'm mad you never thought I deserved one." Mom's eyes watered. "I don't know how to fix that." "You don't," I said. "You just start acting like you see me now." Silence. Then Dad looked up. "We'd like to come to court one day. Sit in the back. Just see you work." That one hit me. Hard. "Fine," I said. But no whispering or gum chewing. I run a tight room. Dad smiled at that. Wouldn't expect anything less. We cleared the table like civilized adults, and as I rinsed plates, Mom touched my shoulder gently. "Your grandfather was a military man, you know." "I know." "He'd have been proud." I gave a tired smile. He was the only one who called me Colonel even before I got my commission. "I remember that," she whispered. "I just wish I'd said it first." I didn't answer. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat on the couch and let myself breathe like someone finally allowed me to take up space. Monday came with its usual weight. Briefings, hearings, a full docket of overconfident attorneys, hoping I was in a lenient mood. I wasn't, but I was focused. Halfway through the morning, I caught sight of Morgan in the hallway outside my chambers. She looked out of place, like someone visiting an old high school. Familiar halls, unfamiliar purpose. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said, stepping out. "I had a meeting 2 floors down," she said, then hesitated. "Thought I'd stop by." "You picked a hell of a time. I've got a break at noon if you want to sit in the gallery for a few minutes." She lit up, surprised. "Yeah, I'd like that." "Courtroom 2. You remember how to behave?" She smirked. "No chewing gum, Your Honor?" "Exactly." When she showed up an hour later, she sat quietly in the back row, eyes locked on the bench, like she saw something for the first time. She didn't stay long enough to watch me overrule emotion with razor-sharp language and no smile. When she left, she gave me a 2-finger salute. Nothing dramatic, just acknowledgement. That night, a text came through. "You're terrifying on the bench. I'm proud of you. For real, this time." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I smiled, not for her, but for the girl I used to be who thought she had to stay invisible to survive. I put my phone down, leaned back onto the couch, and for the first time in years, let myself feel what real validation tasted like. Quiet, earned, and mine alone. That calm didn't last. The next day, I got a text from Mom. Short, cold. "Dinner at 6. Come early. No, please." "No, how are you?" Just a demand dressed up as an invitation. My gut told me this wasn't about reconciliation. It was a summons. I showed up in uniform. Not out of pride, just clarity. I was done softening my edges so my family could stay comfortable. The door creaked open before I even knocked. Dad stood awkwardly in a tucked-in golf shirt. Already awkward, like he was preparing for a lecture he didn't want to give. The dining room was set like a movie. Candles, cloth napkins, overly polished silverware. A place for everything. Even when nothing was in its place. Mom hovered by the kitchen island, stirring something that didn't need stirring. Morgan sat stiffly at the table, makeup heavier than usual. Her eyes didn't meet mine. Nathan stood at the back, hands folded, neutral like a witness. No one spoke as I hung up my jacket. I took my seat. Nobody ate. Finally, Mom broke the silence. "We need to talk." "Good," I said. "Let's." She looked startled that I didn't resist, that I didn't play the role of quiet, agreeable Emily. Dad cleared his throat. "We've had a lot to think about since the party." "I'll bet," I said. My tone was flat, not hostile, just done. Morgan sighed dramatically. "Can we not make this some trial, Emily?" I looked at her. "Why not? You made everything else one." Nathan's brow twitched, but he didn't speak. Dad jumped in. "Look, we understand there were mistakes, misunderstandings." I laughed. "Once, dry. A lifetime of them." "Emily," Mom said in her tightest voice. "We didn't know. That's exactly the problem. You never asked. You never wanted to know." "That's not true," Morgan snapped. "You were the one keeping secrets." Because I was tired of explaining myself to people who already had their minds made up. Mom wrung her hands in her lap. "I just don't understand why you never told us you made Colonel." I looked straight at her. "Because I earned it for me, not for applause. And definitely not to hand you another thing to turn into a conversation about Morgan." Morgan slammed her napkin down. "This is exhausting." I turned to her. "Try living it." Nathan finally spoke, his voice low but clear. "This isn't about just the military or job titles. It's about respect. And that's been missing here for a long time." Dad frowned. "Now hold on." "No," Nathan said. "You don't get to play surprised. I sat through that dinner watching a woman get humiliated by her own family while you all laughed along." Mom's mouth fell open. "We weren't laughing." "No," I cut in. "You were just silently endorsing it." The room fell quiet again. The only sound was Morgan's wine glass clinking against her plate as she picked it up with shaking fingers. "You think I'm the villain here," she muttered. "You all do." Nathan didn't flinch. "I think you're hurt. But that doesn't excuse cruelty." Morgan stared at him, her lip trembling. "You don't know what it's like to be the one who always has to be perfect. To hold it together so no one else falls apart." I blinked. That wasn't what I expected. For a split second, I saw the version of her that wasn't manicured and mean. Just scared. Fragile. "You weren't supposed to be the strong one," she whispered. "That was supposed to be me." "That wasn't my call," I said. "I didn't take anything from you." "Yes, you did," she snapped. "You took the only thing I had left, being the best." I didn't speak. There was nothing to say. She was right in a sad, twisted way. She'd built her worth on comparison. The day I surpassed her, quietly, her identity cracked. "You don't need to be the best to matter," I said. "I don't believe that," she whispered. "That's your problem." Silence, again. The air was too thick to breathe. Nathan leaned back, looking at my parents. "You created this. Not by choosing favorites, maybe, but by not noticing the damage. You don't have to fix it all tonight, but you do need to see it." Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad just looked tired, old. "We're sorry," he said, but it didn't land. Too light, too late. "I'm not here for an apology," I said. "I'm here because I'm not hiding anymore." Morgan stood up. "You win." I shook my head. There was no game. She walked out, not slamming the door, just disappearing. No one chased her. I stayed in my seat, listening to the echo of her heels fade down the hallway. and felt a strange mix of grief and relief settle in my chest like dust after a storm. The clink of utensils scraping plates had stopped. No one moved. My mother stared at the centerpiece like it might rearrange her thoughts. My father was still holding his glass of wine in midair as the conversation had physically frozen him. Only Nathan spoke, and even he did it softly. "She didn't expect that to happen tonight." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure anyone expected tonight to go any differently, either. This had been simmering since we were teenagers, maybe longer. What boiled over was overdue. "She needs time," my mom added without looking at anyone. "She's had 30 years, I replied. And the words came out flatter than I meant. "We all have." Nathan looked toward the door Hannah had just stormed through. He stood up. "I'll drive her. You two, maybe just talk." My dad nodded but didn't look up. Nathan squeezed my shoulder gently as he passed. "You didn't say anything cruel. You just told the truth. That's not something you need to apologize for." The door clicked shut behind him. I finally exhaled. Mom stood slowly, walked to the kitchen, and returned with the coffee pot. She poured 3 cups without asking. My dad finally set his wine glass down. "We didn't know, Abby," he said. "That's not an excuse, but we didn't." I wrapped my hands around the mug. "You didn't ask. We thought we were giving you space." "You were giving Hannah all the attention," I said, not sharply, just plainly. "You thought I didn't need it because I didn't demand it, but I did." "You never said anything," my mom murmured. "And every time I did, I got brushed off. I stopped trying." I looked at them both. The only person who came to my swearing in was Aunt Valerie. "You were both invited," my mother winced. "We had that fundraiser." I held up a hand. "It's not about missing the event. It's that no one called. No one asked how it went. I made law review at Columbia, got promoted twice in 5 years. No one ever asked about my work. I let you think I was answering phones because it was easier than hearing Hannah make it a joke again. We thought you didn't want us involved." "Did you think I didn't want you to care?" The silence that followed was not defensive. It was guilty. My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "We made mistakes," he said. "Big ones. With both of you. We made everything about achievements and not about effort or character." My mom nodded, dabbing at her eyes. "And we let Hannah's loudness drown out your quiet. That's on us." I took a sip of coffee. "I don't need apologies. I just want you to see me now, as I really am." "We do," Dad said quietly. "We do now." I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to let that in yet, but I didn't push it away either. 2 days later, I got a text from Hannah. Just 3 words. "I'm in therapy." It was the first time in years she'd said something without a dig, a deflection, or a brag. I stared at it long before replying. "Good." That Sunday, Mom invited us both over for dinner again. I wasn't sure she was brave or foolish, maybe both. I agreed that the condition would be just the 4 of us. No Nathan, no extended family, no performance. Hannah showed up 10 minutes late. Her makeup was minimal and her hair was pulled back. No designer heels, just sneakers and a hoodie. She didn't look defeated, just stripped down. She sat across from me and didn't say anything until after dinner. "I've lied about a lot," she said, breaking the silence. "My job, my titles, even some of the campaigns I said I ran, I didn't." I nodded once, no judgment, just listening. "I always needed to feel like I was ahead of you, because I thought I was supposed to be." Her eyes didn't dart or blink. "And when I wasn't, I didn't know who I was." "I know the feeling," I admitted. "I spent most of my 20s trying to prove I wasn't just your quiet little sister. Then I spent my 30s hiding the proof. Why? Because I thought you'd take it from me, or ruin it, or worse, pretend it didn't matter." She looked down. "I probably would have." We sat in silence for a beat. Then she said it, clear and steady. "I'm proud of you, Emily." It didn't sound forced. It wasn't for show. And it knocked something loose in me that had been locked up since high school. I nodded. "Thanks. I don't know if we can be close again," she added. "But I want to stop being enemies." I don't need a best friend. I just need a sister who doesn't need me to shrink. She met my eyes and smiled, just barely. Deal. Mom brought out the pie like it was peacemaking armor. Dad poured decaf like we were signing a treaty, but it didn't feel fake for the first time in our lives. Just quiet, just real. We talked about nothing much the rest of the night, weather, the Celtics. My dad's new obsession with woodworking. Normal stuff. The kind of normal we'd never had growing up. Not even close. I left before anyone else, letting the calm linger. No hugs, no promises. Just a nod from Hannah and a silent moment of something between respect and relief. On the drive home, I rolled the windows down. The cool air wasn't just lovely, it felt earned. Everything finally made sense, even if none of it was perfect. And that was enough. I let the wind hit my face at every red light, not because I needed the air, but because for once, I didn't want to rush the quiet. The Matthews family hadn't been in one place since the engagement party, but here we were, my parents' anniversary dinner, the four of us under one roof again. My dad grilled steaks with too much enthusiasm, like smoke, and meat could cover the tension. My mom nervously rearranged the salad 4 times. Nathan brought a bottle of wine he knew they couldn't afford but figured it might help. I showed up 5 minutes early. Not because I wanted to be polite, but because I didn't want to walk into a room buzzing with whatever narrative had formed in my absence. Hannah opened the door, no makeup, hair tied up. She was wearing flats and a plain cardigan as if trying not to be looked at. I didn't comment. I just nodded, handed her a bottle of something dry, and stepped inside. Dinner was tense but civil. Nathan was the buffer. He kept asking my dad about baseball and let my mom talk about her garden. Hannah passed me the salt without making a face. It was progress. When we finished eating, my mom brought out an old photo album, one of those leather-bound ones with sleeves stretched from being overstuffed. She flipped to a page with a picture of me at age 11 in an Army cadet uniform, all stiff shoulders and serious eyes. "You always look like you belong there," she said, smiling like she hadn't ignored that photo for the past 2 decades. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My dad cleared his throat. "Abby," he started, "we owe you a real apology, and not the polite, vague kind, the kind where we actually say what we did wrong." I didn't interrupt. I just waited. "We treated you like background noise," he continued, "even when you were doing incredible things. That's not on Hannah, that's on us." Mom squeezed his hand, then added, "I think I got too used to Hannah being loud. I forgot that quiet doesn't mean less." I finally said something. "You didn't just forget. You made it a rule." Nathan sat quietly, letting the weight hang in the air. Hannah didn't rush to defend them. That part surprised me. Instead, she looked down at her lap, fingers tightening around her napkin. "I used to think I had to be the star," she said softly. "Like if I wasn't winning, I didn't matter. So when you started succeeding in ways I couldn't compete with, I needed to believe you were still small." I stared at her, unsure whether to be angry or grateful. "You could have just asked me who I was," I said. "Instead, you decided for me." She nodded. "I did, and I'm sorry." Nathan reached across the table and touched her arm. Not possessively, just steady. She glanced at him, then back at me. "He almost left," she admitted. "Not because you're a judge, because of how I acted when I found out." "He told me," I replied. "I'm glad he stayed. You needed someone who wouldn't let you dodge the mirror." She smiled faintly, the edges softening in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. "Turns out the mirror's brutal." "So is the bench," I said. "I've had to sentence people I knew since childhood. I've watched lives fall apart from a distance of 10 feet. Nathan looked at me. "And still, you've stayed fair." "I've stayed quiet," I corrected. "That's not always the same thing." The room grew silent again, but it wasn't hostile this time. It was the quiet that comes when everyone's tired of pretending they're fine. We sat there with coffee cups and pie crumbs, surrounded by old photos and newer regrets. Hannah spoke again, voice low. I told my boss I don't want a promotion unless I earn it. I'm working on an actual campaign now, one with impact. No more faking. That's more than a job change, I said. That's a personality shift. I figured if my sister could take the hard road, I should stop pretending I'm already at the destination. I almost laughed. Almost. Welcome to the long way around. She held my eyes for a moment. I'm proud of you, Abby. I didn't say it back, not because I wasn't, but because I knew she needed to say it more than I needed to hear it. Nathan looked at all of us, then lifted his glass. To not lying about who we are anymore. We clinked. Softly. No big toast, no applause. Just four flawed people trying to let go of old stories. As I helped clear the table, my mom touched my shoulder. Your courtroom's on the news again. That ruling you gave, it's being cited by 2 other judges. I smiled. Yeah, I heard. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You've done good, Abby. Really good. I'm just getting started, I said, stacking plates. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Never did. I used to think silence was just the absence of noise. Now I know it can be a choice. Not everything needs to be said to be real. Not every wound needs to be open to be understood. And not every truth needs to be loud to carry weight. I don't need to prove anything anymore, not to her, them, or even myself. I just need to live in the space I've earned, quietly, fully, and without apology. If stories like this hit close to home, family revenge, sibling rivalry, or just the messy truth behind family stories, subscribe. There's more where that came from, and if you've ever lived your kind of quiet revenge, drop it in the comments. You're not alone.